Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Growing up, my sister was always the calculated one between us, the type who would play the long game rather than react immediately when wronged. I guess that's what made her revenge on her ex-boyfriend so beautifully orchestrated. My sister had met him at a coffee shop where she worked during her final year of college. He was a regular customer who always tipped well and eventually worked up the courage to ask her out. Things moved quickly after that. Within 6 months, they were living together in a cozy apartment downtown. She had just landed her first job as a graphic designer, and he was working as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. At first, everything seemed perfect. My sister even paid for his new contact lens prescription because his insurance wouldn't cover it. She furnished their entire apartment, bought all the appliances, and made it feel like a real home. But about a year into their relationship, things started changing. He became more controlling, often picking fights over the smallest things. That's when my sister's subtle revenge began. After their first major argument about him constantly leaving dirty dishes in the sink, she waited until he left for work the next day. Then she did something so brilliantly devious that I couldn't help but admire her creativity. She moved every single piece of furniture in their apartment exactly 1 inch to the left. Every single piece. The next morning, she texted me about how well her plan had worked. She gleefully described how he kept bumping into things all day, stubbing his toe twice and nearly spilling his coffee that morning. And he had no idea why any of it was happening. This became her signature move. Every time they had an argument, she would move everything either 1 inch to the left or back to its original position. The space between furniture stayed the same, so nothing looked obviously different, but it was just enough to throw off his muscle memory. Later that week, she messaged me saying he had complained about feeling like he was going crazy because he couldn't figure out why he kept running into things. When I asked if he had noticed anything different about the furniture, she replied that he hadn't. He had even suggested getting his eyes checked. This went on for months, but then everything changed when she discovered he was cheating. She found messages on his phone while he was in the shower. He had been seeing his co-worker for the past 3 months. My sister didn't confront him immediately. Instead, she spent the next week planning while pretending everything was normal. Then one day while he was at work, she executed her master plan. She texted me to announce that she had finished taking everything she had bought from the apartment, emphasizing she meant everything. When I asked her to explain what everything meant, she sent back a detailed list: light bulbs, toilet paper, towels, all the silverware, the coffee maker, the toaster, the microwave, even the shower curtain. She explained she had only left what he owned before meeting her, which wasn't much. But she didn't stop there. She froze all his keys in separate blocks of ice: car keys, storage unit keys, apartment spare keys, each in its own container, perfectly labeled with what they were. She took his contact lenses too, leaving him with just his old glasses that had an outdated prescription. The coup de grace? She bought several pounds of raw shrimp and carefully placed them inside all the curtain rods before sealing them back up. Then she sent screenshots of his cheating conversations to his mother, along with a polite message explaining why she was ending their relationship. When he came home that evening, he found an apartment stripped of almost everything, keys frozen in ice, and a note that simply read, "Hope your co-worker has extra contact lenses." The aftermath was even better than we expected. According to mutual friends, he spent weeks trying to figure out where the mysterious smell was coming from. He called exterminators, plumbers, and even had the walls checked for mold. The smell just got worse and worse. He eventually had to move out of the apartment, losing his security deposit because the property manager thought he had damaged the place. His mother was so disappointed in him that she refused to help him financially with the move. She even called my sister to apologize for her son's behavior and asked if they could still keep in touch. Now he's living in a much smaller apartment across town, still trying to rebuild his basics collection. and his co-worker dumped him after realizing he had been lying to her about being single. Meanwhile, my sister moved to a better apartment, got a promotion at work, and started dating someone new who appreciates her attention to detail. My family and I had just moved into our new house about a week ago. After months of house hunting, we finally found the perfect place in some neighborhood. The previous owners had kept the place in great shape, and the location was perfect, just a 15-minute drive from both my high school and my dad's workplace. We were especially excited because my grandpa was coming over for dinner for the first time since we moved in. He doesn't visit often since he's usually busy with his work at the courthouse, so it was going to be a special evening. Everything was going great until we heard angry shouting coming from outside. My dad went to check what was happening, and I followed him to the front door. There was this woman, probably in her mid-40s, standing next to my grandpa's car and screaming at the top of her lungs. She was yelling about how the parking spot was hers and that she'd been parking there for months, demanding that we couldn't just take her spot. My dad tried to reason with her, keeping his cool despite her aggressive tone. He explained that this was public street parking in front of our house and there was no assigned parking here. She shot back that she didn't care and that she'd been parking there since the house was empty, insisting she needed the spot for her second car. My dad calmly pointed out that the house wasn't empty anymore, and his father was our guest who could park wherever he wanted on this public street. The woman became even more agitated, accusing us of thinking we could just move in and take over everything, bragging about how she'd lived there for 12 years. My dad tried one more time to get her to be reasonable, telling her to calm down and find another spot since this wasn't her private property. She responded with a nasty comment telling my dad to go pound sand, to which he replied that she was the one who needed to do that, warning her to leave before things got out of hand. She stormed off toward her house. We went back inside to continue our dinner, but not even 5 minutes later we heard the sound of glass shattering outside. We all rushed to the window, and what we saw was absolutely insane. This woman was going completely berserk on my grandpa's car with a baseball bat. She had already smashed the windshield and was working on the side windows, glass flying everywhere. My dad shouted at her to stop and asked what she thought she was doing. She screamed back that this was what happens when people don't respect her property. My grandpa, who had been surprisingly calm this whole time, pulled out his phone and made a quick call. He spoke quietly, but I could tell by his tone that he wasn't worried at all. Less than 2 minutes later, 2 police cars came screaming down our street, lights flashing. 4 officers jumped out with their weapons drawn. One officer commanded her to drop the bat and put her hands where they could see them. Karen dropped the bat but tried maintaining her tough act, claiming we were harassing her and had stolen her parking spot. Then everything changed when one of the officers greeted my grandpa, addressing him as judge and asking if he was all right. My grandpa calmly assured the officer he was fine and thanked him for responding so quickly. All the color drained from her face as she realized she had just vandalized a judge's car, and not just any judge, but one who had probably sentenced hundreds of criminals in our county. She could barely stutter out the word judge in her shock. The first officer told her she was under arrest for criminal damage to property, disturbing the peace, and threatening behavior. She immediately started backpedaling, saying she didn't know and trying to apologize. My grandpa told the officers he wanted to press charges to the fullest extent of the law, suggesting this incident could qualify as attempting to intimidate a court official, even though she wasn't aware of his position at the time. She began pleading with my grandpa, addressing him as "Your Honor," and begging for forgiveness, claiming it was just a mistake. The second officer shut her down, telling her she should have thought about that before taking a bat to someone's car. They took her away in handcuffs, sobbing and begging the whole time. My grandpa's insurance covered the damage to his car, but Karen's problems were just beginning. Not only did she get charged with multiple crimes, but the whole incident was captured on our new security cameras, which we had installed just 2 days before because the previous owners warned us about a difficult neighbor. She ended up getting sentenced to 6 months in jail by another judge, Since my grandpa recused himself from the case, had to pay a massive fine, and was ordered to undergo anger management therapy, she also had to sell her house and move away because the judge issued a restraining order that prevented her from coming near my grandpa or our property. The new neighbors who moved into her old house are absolutely lovely. They even asked permission before parking in front of our house, which we found hilarious, given what had happened. I've dealt with my fair share of discrimination due to my genetic condition, but this one really takes the cake. And before anyone thinks this is made up, I get it. But other disabled folks will probably find this as satisfying as I did. Some background. I was born with this genetic condition that basically turned my body into a walking medical mystery. The worst parts are my severe walnut allergy and the fact that I had to battle cancer in my late teens. Being in my mid-20s now, people often look at me and think, oh, you're not that disabled. But they have no idea what I deal with daily. I've been working various retail jobs since finishing my treatment, and while I'd experienced subtle discrimination before, nothing prepared me for what happened at this major retail chain. I needed a job and they were hiring cashiers. Simple enough, right? The interview went well initially. The store manager seemed impressed with my experience and availability, but then we got to the gap in my employment history. The manager asked about the gap in my resume from 3 years ago. I explained that I was undergoing chemotherapy treatment at the time and was now cancer-free. The manager's entire demeanor changed. They mentioned their strict policies about employment gaps. I tried to be accommodating, offering to provide medical documentation and explaining that I might need some minor accommodations due to my condition. That's when the manager revealed their true colors. They told me they don't do accommodations at their company, explaining that the owner was very particular about these things. The manager then went on to say they don't typically hire anyone with gaps in their resume due to disability or illness. I directly asked if they were refusing to hire me because I had cancer. The manager tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't personal but just company policy, and that the owner didn't want to deal with complications. I was stunned, but thankfully I'd learned from past experiences to record important conversations in my single-party consent state. I reached out to their HR department immediately. The next day I was sitting across from the owner himself, who also happened to be the head of HR. He started by trying to downplay the situation, suggesting there had been a misunderstanding with the manager and apologizing for any mix-ups. I corrected him, explaining that there was no misunderstanding. I detailed how their manager had denied me reasonable accommodation and explicitly stated their discriminatory hiring policies. I pointed out how absurd it was that my past chemotherapy would affect my ability to work as a cashier. The owner tried to dismiss it as unprovable, explaining that they don't record employee calls and suggesting it was just a case of he said, she said. That's when I dropped my bombshell. I interrupted him to clarify that I had the entire conversation recorded for my records. The owner was shocked, stammering as he asked if I had really recorded their employees. I simply responded by stating that our state has single-party consent laws. The color drained from his face when I played the recording. His manager's voice filled the room crystal clear, repeating their discriminatory policies about not hiring anyone with disability-related resume gaps. The silence that followed was deafening. The recording continued, capturing every discriminatory comment, every illegal policy statement, and even the manager bragging about how they've avoided hiring problematic people in the past. The owner tried to salvage the situation by suggesting we discuss a settlement, but I shut that down immediately, informing him that I'd already filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I explained how interested they were in the recording, especially since it proved discrimination against all disabled applicants, not just me. The owner's face went from pale to green, but now they had a bigger problem. The commission launched a full investigation, and other former applicants started coming forward with their stories. They're now facing massive fines, mandatory sensitivity training, and regular audits of their hiring practices. The manager was fired, and the owner had to step down from his HR position. The company had to hire an independent HR firm to handle all future employment matters. My husband and I have been married for 2 years, and like many young couples, we're trying to save up for our own home. We currently live in his parents' basement suite. His parents have been incredibly supportive of our goals. I moved to this country 8 years ago with my 2 older brothers for better opportunities. The rest of my family, my parents and younger siblings, stayed back home. Life was going well until we received devastating news. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. The healthcare system in our home country isn't great, so my entire family moved here for her treatment. Despite everyone's hopes and prayers, we lost her 3 months ago. After her passing, my family decided to stay here. My eldest brother, his wife, and their baby took in my dad and younger brother. However, their house couldn't accommodate my 19-year-old sister. They asked if she could stay with us, and seeing how lost she looked after mom's death, we agreed. That's when everything started going downhill. The first few days were okay, but things quickly deteriorated. She took over our basement living room, turning it into her personal mess hall. The girl doesn't wake up until 5 in the afternoon, and when she does, she acts like she's at a hotel with full service. I tried asking her nicely to clean up after herself when she makes snacks. She just rolled her eyes and asked why she should bother, since I'm home all day anyway. When I explained that she needs to contribute something to the household, she used her visa situation as an excuse, claiming she couldn't work, so what did I expect her to do? I suggested she could at least keep her space clean and help with basic chores. All I got was a dismissive whatever in response. Her favorite activity, playing video games all night while my husband and I pay for everything. Food, utilities, you name it. Not once has she said thank you. I've been on stress leave from work for 2 months, so I've taken on most of the household responsibilities. But apparently that's not enough. One day I was exhausted after cleaning the entire suite. She had the nerve to ask me to make her special noodles with spicy sauce. When I refused and told her there were leftovers in the fridge, she made this dramatic declaration about hoping to follow mom because she was supposedly being abused here. My husband jumped in, furious at her manipulation, pointing out how we'd given her everything. She just screamed back that nobody cares about her and we're all horrible. That's when she started posting on social media about being a victim in our home. She even complained to my eldest brother about how no one is taking care of her. He wasn't having any of it, telling her bluntly that she's 19 and needs to figure things out herself, reminding her that we're doing more than enough. After 2 weeks of silent treatment, while still living in our space and eating our food, I finally had enough. My husband's parents, who are the sweetest people I know, started making comments about the situation. When even they expressed disapproval, you know it's bad. I told her to pack her bags. My other brother, who lives in a studio apartment, took her in. But a week later, he called to inform me that his landlord wouldn't let her stay, and she'd be coming back to us on Thursday. When I protested, he pulled the older brother card, trying to boss me around. I reminded him that being older doesn't give him the right to dump his problems on us, especially when we've been driving him around because he doesn't have a car. During our family meeting, my eldest brother declared that our sister was now just mine and my other brother's problem. My dad can't take her due to visa issues and his health problems. That's when I made a decision. I contacted an immigration lawyer friend who confirmed that my sister's tourist visa was expiring soon anyway. I gathered the family and laid out 2 options. Either she starts contributing and showing genuine appreciation, or she goes back home to stay with our aunts. Suddenly, the abuse didn't seem so bad, and she's now miraculously able to wake up before noon, keep her space tidy, and even helps with dinner. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.